Hi, everybody, and welcome to our third bonus call for Ignite 2024. Tonight, I am so excited to have Rivka Slatkin of the Marriage Restoration Project with us. I'm really excited to pepper her with questions because every year when we go through the Ignite material, there are always curiosities about other avenues of exploration that women who have studied Ignite, who have learned the content, now want to start learning more about. One of those is Taharas Mishpacha, right? People are genuinely curious after having learned Ignite content of like, wait, what don't I really understand about Taharas Mishpacha? It's so much more than just like the laws and the nitty gritty. There's a whole philosophy behind it, and a lot of women are inspired to learn more about that. I've seen women be very inspired to learn more about holistic attitudes towards their body, femininity, getting more in touch with the body's language and the fertility awareness method. So we spoke more about that. And of course, there's a major interest in couples, relationships, conversations, communications, couples counseling. What does that mean? And where do we go from here? So this year, I am so excited to bring on Rivka. But before I unmute her and let her speak, I'm going to keep her in the corner and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I got to know Rivka. So when did I first meet the Slatkins? Rivka is part of a team. She works together with her husband, Rabbi Shlomo Slatkin. They work together as imago counselors. And for the sake of Ignite being a women's course, I asked Rivka to come and present on her own. She did mention she's a tiny bit insecure coming here without her husband, so we're here to make her feel really, really comfortable. But where did I first meet the Slatkins? So this is going to go all the way back to 2018 when I was in school for intimacy counseling. And the school that I was in had a baseline training where you basically spent a year training. And then in our last semester, we had to choose a major. And one of the majors, I actually chose two majors. I chose female sexuality, and the second major I chose was relationship transformation. And so I was deep into my studies trying to complete all the course materials for my major, which was relationship transformation. And we were studying attachment theory and imago theory and all of those exciting things. And I had a stack of books on a table in the entrance, well, the kind of like the foyer to my house, not quite at the front door, but more like, the sitting area. And at the time, we had someone from Eretz Yisrael staying in my home that people were meeting, and they were scheduling time to meet with. And, every so often I would just walk into my house and there would just be strange people sitting on my couches or whatever it is, waiting to have their turn with this visiting person from Eretz Yisrael. And at one point I walked into my house. I'll never forget. It was just one afternoon. I walked into my house. I was like probably very flustered. I had picked up a kid, from school, and it was like towards the end of the day. And this gentleman is sitting on my couch, and I walk in, I was not expecting him, and he turns to me and he says, "Who in this family is like a relationship counselor or something?" And I'm like, I didn't really know what to say. I was like, it's not me, but also it could possibly one day be me. Why? And he says, "Oh, I'm just noticing these books." And, he started getting into this whole conversation with me about these books because this was actually his specialty. And I felt a little bit like insecure, like, oh my God, I'm in school. Like, I know nothing, and there's this like a real therapist, having this conversation with me. But it opened up a beautiful connection and a friendship. I got to know Rabbi Shlomo, I got to know his wife Rivka, and very shortly thereafter, my husband and I asked the Slatkins to come down to our home and host an imago workshop in our home. I was so curious and I was so excited by the work that they were doing. I think it became very clear to me when I was completing my major for school that this was not my thing. That I was not, as much as couples counseling fascinated me, as much as all of these books and these things. You can see that's my bookshelf. Like, every shelf over here has a different theme. That's my couples theme. As much as it interested me, as much as I wanted to learn it, as much as I was passionate about it, I also kind of knew that this wasn't my calling, that I had no interest in actually working with couples. And to find not just a frum therapist who did the work that I really believed in, but who did it together with his wife as a husband and wife team. I felt so excited about getting to know them and about bringing their work into the frum community because I could sense how desperately it was needed. And here we are. I mean, it's a couple of years later, and I get to introduce Rivka to you myself. So give me 1 second while I unmute Rivka. and I take a moment to spotlight her so that we can all see her and me. And hold on. Here we go. Hi, Rivka.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for agreeing to be on here. I know that there was like an intimidation factor.
I was thinking that actually it's in some ways it's actually really cool to speak without Shlomo here because he's really the therapist and I'm not. So I can say like a lot more that he is not allowed to say.
Ooh.
So I was thinking that's probably a good thing for everybody. Just, you never know what's going to come up. And therapists, they have a lot of rules of like what they can say and what, and he's also a rabbi. So, that makes it even harder to,
So he's the rabbi, he's the therapist, he's
yeah.
the imago counselor, and you're the wife.
I am the wife, yes.
But you are also imago trained and certified, correct?
So I'm not sure. The part I was allowed to do was when so Shlomo, went to school for counseling psychology, and then he went on to get a master's, and then he went on into Imago to achieve like all the different levels of certification they have. Um, and then part of that was becoming a workshop presenter for Getting the Love You Want workshops. Now, they're a little funky on some of the new rules and old rules, but I was allowed to become a workshop presenter with
But
him.
you've been there way back. Today, I don't think that that's you. If you're not a licensed therapist today, you can't really become a
I
presenter,
I don't
right?
know how it is now. I think there is special dispensation maybe for the spouse of a workshop presenter. There is a track in Imago called Imago Facilitators, but you're right. I don't think regular lay people that are not related to a certified Imago therapist can present at an Imago workshop.
So
Yeah.
when you are onboarding clients, the understanding is that your husband is the therapist, he's the one with the licensure, and you are there to facilitate and hold that space with him, also trained, but not in the therapeutic capacity, more in the workshop presenting.
Yeah, so I don't see any clients privately. I'm definitely not allowed to do that. When we do a group workshop, it's not actually called therapy, even though it's really like therapy. It's actually equal to like 6 months of therapy because it's so intense. But we call it group education. So I can definitely do a Getting the Love You Want workshop. It doesn't require, it's not therapy, but I definitely don't see clients privately. So he really sees the clients privately. And then we have other clinicians on our team. And then I just help co-present like a few times a year for these group workshops.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You said this line that I'm gonna like really jump in on, and you're calling the workshops that you give, and we'll talk later, like not right now. We'll talk later on about what are the different offerings that you give. But you're mentioning the Getting You the Love You Want workshop, which in my understanding is that's your entry level workshop that anybody who wants to work with you should be starting at that level, the Getting the Love You Want workshop, correct?
Um, so yeah, so Shlomo is unique. I do the marketing for our practice. So a few years ago, I decided I wanted couples to be able to come in with a foundation, not just once a week, 50-minute sessions here and there, where it's like you go in for a session, and by the time one person's speaking and the other person has a turn, like the session's over. I thought, you know what, let's make our practice intensive based, where if anybody wants to work with Shlomo, they have to have either done a 2-day private intensive or the 2-day Getting the Love You Want workshop. That's the only way he'll work with people because, like, there's just so much underneath the surface, years and years and years of stuff that can't possibly be transformed in just a once a week session. So, so we, so not only are we Imago trained, we also only see couples if they've experienced intensive work first.
So you made a comment that the Getting the Love You Want today, right, is like doing 6 months of therapy.
Yes.
And you're not saying that lightly. And I know that you're not saying that lightly because I've attended your 2-day workshop. And I want to talk about that. I mean, I've attended this workshop and I got so much out of it in terms of not just the skills and the content and the practice and what it did for me and my spouse, but also just seeing the other couples in the room. We were such a diverse group from, we had couples that were married, had married off all of their kids. We had couples that were just curious, wanting to learn more. We had couples in crisis, thinking about getting a divorce. We had a couple that was dating and not really sure that they were ready to get engaged. It was such a diverse group. And I want to talk about that. And I want to talk about the fact that it really was like 6 months of therapy. I mean, at the time when you guys came here, my husband and I had been married, I don't know, 13 years, 14 years, I don't know, I lose track. We're married now close to 20, we're in our 20th year. So that was just a couple of years ago. And I remember there was this one moment, there was this one exercise that you had done with us, the small, what was it? What do you call it? The small complaints or
Well, small frustrations.
small frustrations, right? No complaints, small frustrations. You had run us through an exercise where we each had to take a small frustration that we had with our partner and run it through some imago dialogue. And that exercise has stayed with me all of this time because that was like the source of this one, let's call it frustration or argument or let's call it eruption, that would keep happening between me and my spouse. And it was in how long was that exercise? It was like a 45-minute total. And we had resolved or at least gotten to the root of something that had been erupting between us and causing so many fights for like 15 years at that point. So when you say that this is 6 months of therapy, you're not saying this lightly. And I'm here to back you up on that.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's intense. Like it's definitely, I mean, I remember 23 years ago, Shlomo wanted me to attend one of these and I didn't want to. And that was like, our story. But yeah, these are really intense. I mean, like I always tell couples, the first day is always the most intense because we have to take you a little bit back into the past because we believe that in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you came from. So the first day is definitely a little bit of a descent back into childhood, both of your respective childhoods. We don't stay there for too long, but the first day is definitely sort of going deep into that. And then the next day, the second day, goes into like the present, what's going on, the current frustrations you're experiencing, and then how to address them. And then the afternoon, we focus on the future. Like, what are your relationship goals? What is the vision for your future together? Are you on the same page? So really like past, present, and future, all in just 2 days. So by the time the second day is over, I feel like I've been with a couple for like a week. It's a really amazing feeling.
Yeah, I'm actually like I've attended your workshop. I've actually hosted you guys in my home twice, right? The first time I attended, the second time I just hosted, and I'm listening to you describe what it is that you accomplish in 2 days, and my head is spinning. And one part of me is like, yeah, we did all of that in 2 days. But hearing it from an outside, as if like, what? We really do all of that in 2 days? Like, is
Yeah.
that really possible? I mean, I know I'm familiar with your work, but a lot of the people who are listening to this call are like really, me and my husband, like we're never going to see eye to eye. We've been fighting for 20 years. You mean you get all of that done in 2 days?
Yeah, I mean, it's a start. It's a start. It's just so amazing. We had like a couple come in and it's their second marriage, wife's about to have a baby. And then he comes in saying like, I don't know if I want to be married to this one. I'm thinking like, poor thing, like she's about to pop. And I'm like, oh my God. So I was like a little nervous for them. And there's, it's very private in the workshop that even though you come in and nobody knows anybody else's business, there's one part in the beginning where we just like ask, tell us one word tell us one word that you're feeling right now and one thing you'd like to learn more about. And they were both quite nervous. And by the end of the second day, oh my gosh, they were all smiles. They were affectionate. They were happy. They were so joyful. They had really, I could see like they were crying the first day and the second day they were just, and they emailed us afterwards like, you saved our marriage, like, and everybody else told us to get divorced. And that's just why I keep going. That's why I love what we do. It's
I've also gotten emails from people who have thanked me for sending them to you,
aw.
saying the same thing. Like the Slatkins have saved our marriage. And I know the people that I've sent to you. And not everybody that I sent to you. What?
It's Hashem. It's not us.
I know. But when I make a recommendation based on somebody that I trust and that I know their work because maybe even I've, appreciated their work. But not everybody that I sent to you has gone to you, right? I can only make the recommendation. We don't know if they're going to take it, but every single person that has taken my recommendation and gone to you has come back saying like a thank you a
Right.
thousand times over. And I've sent people to you from in all walks of life, right? At all different phases and stages of their marriages. I've sent people to you from like the most Hasidic enclave, sheltered environments. I've sent Bali Tshuva to you. I've sent second marriages to you, I believe. And I know that I have sent people to you that were in like they were packing suitcases and getting separated.
Mm.
And I remember this one particular story where there was somebody that I was sending to you. She was in a marriage that there was no hope. There was nothing. Like everybody was telling her, you got to get out. This is over. This is never going to happen. And I don't even know. I think it was basically it was over. It was very much over. And she told him the one thing I'm giving you is if, we got to go to the Slatkins. And now it's years later. They are like the couple that everybody dreams they want to be.
Oh,
They had
how
another baby. And, recently she had called me up and said, do you remember? Do you remember? And I was, it had like flown out of my mind. It wasn't that I didn't remember. It just like, it's so not where this couple is at. We've already celebrated like simchas with this couple.
wow.
And it was like, oh my God, you're right. You're right. I remember you guys were once there. And like, I see these stories so many times after people have gone to you. And
Baruch
I
Hashem.
wish the world knew. And you're right. It's not the Slatkins, it's Hashem. But there is something in the work that you are doing that I think people need to know more of. And I'll tell you why. I mean, I have a 17-year-old son, right? So he needs his driver's license, they have to take these tests and then they fail their driver's test or whatever it is. And you basically think that you see that anything in life that's important or that that has you taking certain risks, you got to practice, you got to take tests, and you got to pass those tests. And when it comes to the most important job in our life that we will ever be doing, which is our marriage and our parenting, you don't need a license. Nobody cares. And we have this like myth that we just married the person of our youth, whatever that means, whether it was the person we fall in love with or the person we were set up with, and it's supposed to work.
Right.
And then it doesn't. And for everybody, and I think I feel like it's safe to say this, it doesn't for anybody,
Yeah.
right? And everybody hits that point at some point, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, that's the foundation of, well, not the foundation. There's so many amazing parts of imago theory, but I mean, Harville says like we fall in.
Oh, just for everybody, Harville is Harville Hendrix. He is the
Yes,
founder of Imago theory.
yes. So he says, and this is one of the things I think Shlomo just found so much in line with Torah is that the book, Getting Love?
Yeah, I'm going to show it on the screen. I'll also link it for everybody. This is Getting the Love You Want. It's Harville Hendrix's, basically the book. He has other books, but this is the book. And I'm gonna put a link to it in the notes. It's definitely worth reading.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's his like magnum opus, and he has so many books after that, but that's really the foundational model. You have a bunch of others?
Keeping the Love You Find. there are quite a few.
Yeah, so that one, Keeping the Love You Find, is for individuals or singles or people that were divorced or people that don't have a willing partner. It's just another amazing. We're actually going to be adding the Keeping the Love You Want workshop to our repertoire of workshops because we don't really see individuals, but so many people don't have a spouse that's willing to go with them. So we want to be able to give them some growth work also. But Harville says, when we first fall in love, or even a basho, or like shidduch dating, not necessarily falling in love, but we are drawn to the person that we're drawn to for a reason. And at first, all these chemicals are flooding our brains, so we don't really know what we're getting into. And he calls it nature's anesthesia. And it's really like Hashem, it's the hook that gets us in, because if we really knew what marriage was going to be like, we wouldn't ever get married because, it can be very unpleasant. But anyway, so
By the way, you heard it here, everybody. There was a marriage therapist who said this. Marriage therapists also know that nobody should be getting married.
Yeah, nobody would be getting married without these, endorphins and all these chemicals. But where most people, I think, get it wrong is they think, uh-oh, I made the wrong choice. I must either separate or get divorced because that's what it seems like, and we got it wrong. And what Harville says is it's not a sign you made the wrong choice, it's a sign you made the right choice, because the first stage of relationships, the romantic stage, only lasts about 0 to 6 months. And then after that comes the power struggle, which is where most people are. But what they don't realize is there's a third stage called the conscious marriage. So once you gain consciousness that there is a third stage.
Hold up, hold on, 1 second, 1 second, 1 second. I'm
Yeah.
here, 1 second. I'm hearing that the honeymoon phase, the nice part, is 0 to 6 months.
Yes,
Yes.
on average.
And the next one is the struggle, the power struggle.
The power struggle, and that can be forever.
Okay, so wow, this is a real advertisement for marriage. Like everybody go and get married because after 6 months it's going to suck. You're going to be in a power struggle pretty much forever unless you figure out that there is a conscious marriage aspect. Talk about that.
Yeah, unless you realize there's a third and final stage, which is either called real love or the conscious marriage, and it's really like a deepening of the romantic love stage, which we can actually never go back to. So we're never going to go back and finally achieve that first amazing, oh my God, you complete me stage.
I'm so disappointed right now. What does that mean? Isn't that the best part of every relationship? Every Disney movie is built on, oh my God, we're falling in love. So like, you mean we never get that back? Why would anyone keep trying?
It's, I guess, according to Harville, who Shlomo says, Harville and Helen are in their 90s or late 80s, and she's also the heiress to the ketchup company. So like, and they have no kids in the house. So things can be, really wonderful. But all jokes aside, the real love stage can be deeper than the romantic love stage. So the first stage is a little bit more lusty. I can't keep my eyes off you. I can't keep my hands off you. Like the real love stage is much deeper than that.
So I need to hear more about this. It's not just me. I think everyone needs to hear more about this because I think the biggest misconception that people have is A, once we've lost the honeymoon stage, it means the marriage is broken.
Right.
And B, we fix the marriage by climbing, up a straight wall, trying to get back to that stage. And you're saying, no, we're never going back to that stage. But my understanding is that deep love would probably be a better stage.
Probably a healthier.
Tell us the difference.
That's a good question. I don't know that I've ever explored it fully, but I would imagine it's just a lot deeper. You're more developed. You've gone through so much together. You've been through the struggles and you made it. So you've changed together, separately, but also together. So you've grown. Like if you think back to yourself when you were 19, you're so much more evolved and so much more developed. So like you have this deeper appreciation of who you are. So you can achieve that also with a relationship together.
I like what you said about think about who you were when you were 19 because I've seen this. I've seen people my age, mid 30s, 40s, fall in love, whether it's a second marriage or whatever, and they go through that 19-year-old phase, the lusty falling in love, and it's actually embarrassing. Now that you mention it, it's like, do I really want to go back to that phase in my life? Like when we see a 50-year-old who's like in that like passionate lusty, we're just like, dude, slow down.
Yeah. Well, I definitely, yeah, that makes sense. And also every time somebody enters, so like, okay, in an affair situation, right?
Ooh, we went there tonight.
Yes,
okay.
We're going right to there. So in an affair situation, the person will be like, well, this person just completes me and this person makes me feel so good. And of course they do because they're in the romantic stage with a new person. So when I say think about your 19-year-old self, I don't necessarily mean in age, because even like an 80, 90-year-old person who entered into a new relationship might go through that romantic stage again. But I guess with the partner that you've had, that you married, that you committed to all those years ago, and then been through all these challenges with, that I don't think you can really go back to what it once was.
Yeah, I was reading a book over Shabbos, And it's a historical novel. And part of the novel, they were talking about winemaking. The family represented in the novel was actually Rashi. It's a story about Rashi, and his family was involved in the wine business. He was a wine seller, and so there's this anecdotal story of how the something happened in the cellar. So they were trying to age their wine, and instead something went wrong with the fermentation process. And when they opened their wine for the tasting, it hadn't aged, and in fact it bubbled, and that became champagne. Now they're crediting Rashi, just because it's a historical novel, it's fiction, So in the fiction, they're crediting him with like, oh, they made this discovery of champagne. It did not start with Rashi, but it was a very cute anecdotal historical piece to put in there about how champagne began. And when you're describing the two different versions of love, what I'm hearing is there's the champagne version, right? There's the 19-year-old falling in love, and the truth is, when we get engaged in the beginning of that love, we pop champagne. Right? That's what we do. And then there's the fine wine version of love. And there's no question that the fine wine is a developed taste, right? It's a sensitized palate. It costs a lot more money, right? People will store those bottles for a long time and they only take them out. Like, there's an appreciation to a fine wine.
I love your metaphor. That's such a great way to describe.
You can use it. I let.
I'm going to use it. I love that. I love that. Because yeah, I haven't really thought about the differences between the romantic love and the conscious marriage stage, but that's a beautiful way to describe it.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
So I want to talk more though about, what it is. I feel like people need to hear more, because this is our 5th cohort of Ignite, and every single year, all 5 years that we've given this course, that people have been very invested and very excited. Every time I mention you guys, especially in module 6. Module 6 is where we talk about relationships, and people are like, okay, we got to get the Slatkins down to the tri-state area, because that's where the majority of my participants are from at this point. And it never quite reaches the finish line, right? And I've discussed it, briefly with you, why we think that is, right? And I think on one level, I think that there is some sort of stigma around what people, especially like, the wives are on this course. So the wives are very excited, like, yes, we're all for this. And then when they start trying to get their husbands to come, people are like a little bit resistant. And I think that there's probably a lot of stigma around what people assume the work that you do is. So a couple of questions. The work that you do, there are many different kinds of marriage counseling. Am I correct?
Yeah. Are you talking about like modalities?
Right.
Yeah.
So what would separate Imago from like when people think like, oh my God, we're going to marital counseling, right? What is it that you and your husband do that are a little bit different than like the typical marriage counselor that you would go to see in a crisis?
Okay. So that's a good question. So Shlomo usually says like the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result, right? So first of all, a lot of therapists that see couples and they call themselves marriage counselors really didn't go necessarily for any advanced training in couples work. And that's because you can become a social worker and you could say, I'm a marriage counselor. You don't have to, by law, have any advanced training in couples work to say that you see couples, which is so bad.
That's very scary. You mean that there are people out there that specialize, and I'm worried about this, because if I were to go to a marriage counselor, so to speak, right, that means I'm in a form of crisis. My marriage is struggling. I'm really needing help. I'm going to somebody that talks about themselves as if they're a marriage counselor, and you're saying that they could be calling themselves a specialist just because they're interested in that specialty?
Yeah, it's really scary. I'm in a lot of therapist Facebook groups, and I see all the time a therapist will post, new therapist here, never seen a couple before, but I'm starting to go into marriage counseling. What do I do? And I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, like, it's like if someone had, God forbid, brain cancer and they were going to their pediatrician, or they needed to be represented in court for criminal law and they went to their tax attorney. Like, it's such a bad thing. I don't know why the law isn't repealed specifically when it comes to marriages. So that's number one. Like,
well, I have a suspicion about that. The law doesn't really care about marriages. They benefit from everybody getting divorced. So yeah, let's go.
Yeah, no, you're right. So number one, the difference is Imago is marriage friendly, meaning a real advanced clinician in Imago therapy is not going to ever advise a couple to separate or divorce or say something that's anti-relationship, because number one, we're trained to how to deal with couples, but number two, we identify the patient as the space between the couple, not he's a narcissist and she's a bipolar. And like,
Oh, we need to talk about that.
for us, it's about the space is the patient. So is the space between you and your spouse toxic? Is it healthy? Is it connected? Is it disconnected? That's the identified patient. So I see someone just wrote in the chat, I've experienced marriage counseling. They are terrible. Yes, a lot of it is terrible because number one, they don't know what they're doing, some therapists. But two, this is the part I really wanted to get to more importantly, is therapists will often just have couples repeat the dynamic that's going on at home. So if you're screaming at each other at home, you just come into the office and you scream at your spouse in the office. So Shlomo always says, so what's different? That's the definition of insanity. You're bringing your problems the same way you talk to each other at home. You're just doing it in someone else's office. So what's different, you know?
So I heard you say something that's really, I want to just repeat it. You're saying that the imago therapy is not marriage therapy, it's relationship therapy. And I just heard someone else, the reason why it stood out to me when you said it is because I just heard someone say this to me like last week, somebody that's not a counselor, but more in the, let's call it based in arena. Okay. So deals with a lot of marriages, the dissolving of marriages, and said something to me that was so, the line just really like just stayed in my mind. He said, I'm not in service of marriage. I am, because marriage is a social construct. And this was so interesting because it was someone who's like in a, like I said, like a based in arena. He said, I am in service of the relationship. And he says, the difference is marriages come and go, but you will be in relationship with this person forever, especially if you have assets or kids in common. So you think that you divorce and this person is out of your life. No, they are going to be in your life forever because you share children with them, and it will be that much harder because the only time that you will ever see this person is going to be at the most vulnerable times, like when you're marrying off a kid or you have a grandchild together and you're making a bris. You're not going to see this person in the grocery store with low stakes. You're going to be seeing this person forever, for the rest of your life, at the most high stakes, vulnerable moments. He's going to walk in with his new wife when, you know, your child is engaged, or like, so he says we have to be in service of the relationship because the relationship continues forever. And just from my experience with you and having seen the different couples in the room when I attended your workshop, I know that that is what you do, because there was a couple there that was, again, not sure if they're going to get engaged or they're going to, you know, move their separate ways. And I watched how you and your husband dealt with that. You didn't care. You know, you weren't pro or against what may or may not happen with this couple. It wasn't like, oh my God, you got to tie the knot. Right? That wasn't the point of the work that we were doing. It was about clarity. It was about compassion. It was about kindness and connection.
Yeah, it really is all about the space between. Yeah, you're right. And that's really interesting that the rabbi spoke about it that way, because people are in relationship. I think we've lost. Yeah, I think people don't realize, like, they think, okay, this isn't working out, let's get divorced, and then they still have to deal with this person for the rest of their lives. So yes, you might as well learn how to communicate with this person, even once for those on the call or whoever listening that is divorced, you might as well learn how to communicate and have emotional safety with this person, around this person. And so you gain awareness on how not to experience the same dynamic the next time around.
So when you say experience emotional safety, I know you're going to have a bunch of people who are like, but my spouse is not emotionally safe, right? So how do you address that? I mean, there's no question that there are some people that they're just not emotionally safe, right? Because they don't have those tools. So you're saying, though, that there's a way for me to experience or to learn how to experience emotional safety, even if my partner may not be there yet?
Yeah, for sure. It's much, much harder to create emotional safety when you are around somebody who is less aware, maybe emotionally intelligent. But I would say we have to start with ourselves. You know, we really have to look at ourselves and take ownership for what we do, because we are half of the picture. So, I have to speak very carefully. First of all, of course, physical safety is number one. So, so
Right. So let's put a qualifier here. In the
yes,
case of abuse, whether it's physical abuse, verbal abuse, emotional, like abuse.
abuse is a really broad term. So I would say for now, let's keep it at physical. If someone is not physically safe, that's not a situation that I'm talking about. So I'm not saying try to establish emotional safety with someone who's beating the crap out of you. Like, I'm not saying that. Okay. So if you're not physically safe, you have to
Let's put
get
that
safe.
aside for now.
Put
Yes.
that aside.
Okay.
I'm talking about, but there's plenty of verbal abuse that happens in a marriage. There's also sometimes people that are slapping each other around, not because they're abusers, but the relationship is so unsafe, people are acting out. It's like toddlers. When we don't feel safe, we act out. And the same goes for us as adults. So there's so many points we could talk about, but in situations of verbal abuse and emotional abuse, yes, I've seen people be able to create emotional safety, even with someone who's less emotionally intelligent than them. If someone doesn't have a partner like who is able to consciously do the work with them, you need to start by modeling how to be an emotionally safe person. You can do that with your parenting. You can do that at work. You embody that type of person. And then you will have an impact on those around you. We have like mirror neurons where we end up copying the people that we live closest with. So you will have a ripple effect. But it really starts with ourselves and taking ownership of our own baggage and acknowledging like, oh, when I do this makes him feel really threatened. And then he acts out. So there's a cause and effect. There is.
You mentioned parenting and the ripple effect. So does imago have an effect on the kind of parent you become?
Harville's other book is
Loaded question.
yeah. So Harville did write a parenting book called Giving the Love That Heals. And that's Imago's parenting. And there is an Imago parenting course if anybody would like to take it. That's open to the public, whoever wants to take it. But yes, I mean, there's just so much here. Like, I mean, I've done this work now. I'm married 23 years. I came from a really traumatic divorce. I was thinking of sharing my story. And
Divorce as in your parents.
my parents, yeah. And I could share my story. I realize this is public, but I don't know why I had this feeling like I need to share this because there could be other people that, might go through something similar. And I want them to hear on the other side. But the long of the story is that everything, the way I parent is a result of my experience. So I have to work on myself every single day when it comes to parenting so I don't repeat the same mistakes I'm inclined to make due to my own childhood wounds. So yes, it absolutely impacts how we parent.
Talk about your background a little bit. What did make you get into this line of work? Because you mentioned a little bit before that your husband had wanted you to go to a workshop and you're like, no.
Yeah.
And so like, wait, was it you who got into this line of work? Was it him? How did he convince you? Like, what's the story here? How did you guys get started?
Okay. So it actually goes way back to 1991, I guess.
Is this the Kugel story?
No.
Because I think we're going to all need to hear the Kugel story.
No, I actually really haven't shared this publicly, but for some reason I just had this like, when you asked me to do this the last few nights, I was thinking like, what am I going to talk about? And I just had this thing like, you got to tell this, you got to tell this. So I don't know, whoever's listening, if it helps you, please, I'm happy to sacrifice my privacy. So, so really my earliest childhood memories was of my parents fighting. And I mean, I can remember being 2, 3, 4 years old. They fought for so many hours, like they forgot to give us dinner. And so it was me and my sisters. But anyhow, finally, and they always said we're getting divorced, and they never did. It was kind of like, come on already. When are you going to get divorced? So I remember when I was 11, so we were in a summer camp, and my mother said, oh, girls, I'm picking you up early today. I want to go buy you some headbands and whatever. So she took us, and we're driving. And I'm like, where are we going? And then finally, like 45 minutes later, we pull up in front of someone's house. And she's like, we're going to be staying here for a while. And I was like, wait, what? And then I said, what about Abba? And I remember like saying, "What about Abba?" I remember when I said that sentence that my childhood ended. Like I remember sitting there in the back of the car being like, "Okay, I'm no longer a kid. Like this is it." And this was back in the early 90s. And in the Frum community, nobody was divorced. So what happened was my mother took us away. It was before the age of caller ID. And while she took us, she had a moving van go to my house and she emptied the house completely, completely emptied it. And my father came home from work and the house was completely empty, like not a shower curtain, not a broom, nothing. She had completely emptied the house and she took us with her. And like he had no idea where we were. Anyways, so we were gone for a while. Finally, we reconnected, but it was like that was the start of the end. Like, and even after they had that and they had like a horrible divorce, they still were horrible for the next, I don't know, 15 years. Like, so it just was like this very, I became a very in tune to other people's marriages. Like it was, I was very sensitive. So we'd go to someone's house for lunch on Shabbos, and I could tell like immediately how by how they were talking to each other, like about the marriage. I was just so sensitive to it. So I just always used to say to Hashem, like during my pain, like, what I don't know why you're doing this to me, but like I want to be able to make a difference. And like, I'm going to cry for like 15 minutes and then I'm going to stop because I want to be able to be productive and move on. And then, so when I finally met Shlomo, like we kind of fell in love, even though it was a shit off date. Like we really knew from the first date, it was very lovely. And we thought, we got married and we thought like we have this all figured out, like we're going to be better than my parents, we're going to be connected. And then sure enough, 6 months or whatever into the marriage, it's like, wait a minute, it wasn't supposed to be like this. I started repeating some of the things I saw when I would get frustrated, or then we had our kids, and kids just really make it hard. Like I hate saying it, they're the greatest blessing, but they can really throw a wrench in a marriage. So we really experienced a lot of trouble. So then Shlomo was he really wanted to go to counseling even when we were engaged. I remember calling, do you know Dr. Laura?
Yes, of course.
Okay, so she was on the radio then, and he kept pressuring me like, let's do premarital counseling, let's do premarital counseling. And I'm like thinking like, I just got out of my childhood home. Like I finally just want to like be healthy and not explore all this stuff. So I actually called Dr. Laura and I said, "Hi, I'm an Orthodox girl." That's how I got on the show. She had me on and she's like, what are you calling about? I said, "Well, I'm engaged to this guy and he wants to do premarital counseling and I don't." And she kept saying, "What are you trying to hide? Like, what are you hiding?" And I was like, I really am not hiding anything. I'm just not in the mood to start going back and doing all this work. Anyway, so he has always been the one.
I love that question. What are you trying to hide? I don't know if I would have. Wow, that's a very astute question.
She kept asking it. I don't know if I hung up in the middle of the show or not, but I just was like not in the mood to answer it after a
Well,
while.
this is on live radio. Wow, you brave girl.
It was on live radio because I don't know why at the time I just felt like nobody understood and I wanted to know what she thought. But anyway, so yeah, years later, we were experiencing some trouble, and I was actually getting my sheitel done by a sheitel macher whose father, Rabbi Stauber, alav shalom, was an imago therapist in Muncie, and he did getting the Love You Want workshops. And she was telling me about her father and this thing called imago therapy, where one person would talk and the other person would repeat back what the person was saying. And I'm like, oh, that sounds so interesting. At the same time, I was getting my sheitel done. Shlomo had a friend that told him about Imago, and then we went, and that was
And that's how it began.
that's how it began. Yeah. So he schlepped me along, and I didn't really want to go, but I did.
Wow.
That was
Wow.
a lot. I know.
No, I remember laughing because when you did the workshop and I attended, there was this like joke, between like we were joking about the group of like who's the Baal Tshuva, and like who comes from the normal background and who doesn't come from the normal background, and we were joking about how you and your husband presented so differently, and you really can't guess, you can't guess someone's background
No.
from from at all from how they present as adults. And
And that's the
really,
interesting thing. We're sorry to interrupt you.
yeah.
We really are all walking around wounded. Like we say this in our workshop. Like people look like they have everything together. They look like they've got it all together. But really, all of us, we're walking around with wounds. Our spouse is walking around with wounds. And like we say a lot of times, your spouse is not your enemy. Your spouse is a wounded child. So the same pain that you have, most likely deep down, is the same pain that your spouse has in different ways.
Yeah, I think there's just like this big stigma around when I send people to you. Especially like the women are like, yes, let's go. Like this is just an extension of Ignite. The men are like, no, everyone's gonna know that there's something wrong with my marriage. And then when they hear that the Getting the Love That You Want workshop is a group with other couples, and I know that there's a private option, but it's significantly more expensive, right? There's the group, and you guys are actually very reasonably priced for, your prices fluctuate. Everyone's prices have, especially lately. But, I keep an eye on everyone's pricing, and your pricing is extremely reasonable, especially because you're offering 2 days and there's a stay, right? They sleep over, no hotel. And there's just a lot of like, no, I'm not going. I'm not going in a group. I don't want anyone to see me. I don't want anyone to know. And the amount of like time I have spent with couples that I've recommended to come to you, trying to convince them it's not what you think. Your privacy is not going to be, it's not going to be challenged. You don't have to share anything you don't want to share. No one is going to look at you in the room and be like, oh, obviously they're having problems. And like, I keep trying to explain to people
Yeah.
that people come to you before they have problems. Like you said, premarital counseling. People come to you because they want to learn and because they want to grow and because they genuinely want to up-level their marriage. But it's amazing how nobody believes me because there's this pervasive myth that the only people who go for couples counseling or couples support are people who are in crisis. And I feel like it's so sad because we have so many couples in crisis that
Yeah.
don't need to be in crisis. Like you say, the workshop is 6 months of therapy. Or for me, I found that it got to the root of this old argument. And it's like, I could have saved years of my marriage way before the crisis point would have hit. Had I think also there's a thing that I like to do for myself that, every year we take on like New Year's resolutions, right? So every year around the time of my birthday or whatever it is, whenever I have the time for it, actually, I try to think how I'm going to up level my life in different ways, right? How I'm going to up level my life physically. So am I going to be more conscious about my diet this year? How am I going to up level my life spiritually? Right? How am I going to up level my life mentally and emotionally? And I look at different areas of my life and I choose like a small thing. It's not a big thing about how to up level. And it's crazy how people don't look at their marriages in that way. Like, oh, what is one way in which you and I can up level our relationship this year? And people, and like for me, the idea of going to a 2 day workshop, right, is a way of up leveling our relationship. And it's like people will not even consider any sort of marriage up leveling unless they're in crisis. And then unfortunately, when they're in crisis, there's a lot of wounding to get past, not just our childhood wounding, but the wounding we've done to each other.
Yeah. It would be nice, I guess, if it was like a requirement for people to go when they got engaged. It would be nice. Um, some rabbis will have couples go for premarital work, which, could be helpful. But I do find though that like back when I called Dr. Laura, I don't know that
By the
it
way,
was,
for everyone listening, this is Dr. Laura Schlesinger. She's still alive.
I'm sure I think
Like,
she might even still be on the radio.
yeah, her radio show has been like 40 years running and it was like a helpline, and she
Yeah.
spoke a lot about like, marital stuff and relationships. I mean, wow, like I haven't when you mentioned her name, there was like this moment of like, wait, what?
Yeah, it
Like
was a
I haven't
long,
heard
I'm
yeah,
old,
I haven't
so
heard her name in a long time. She used to be on the radio, like in the car, like, and hear her and you're not supposed to hear what your parents are listening to. But yeah, wow.
right, right. Yeah, so I don't know, honestly, though, that it would have had the same effect because we were in La La Land, and I don't know that it would have had the same impact um, that it had after we did experience some of that power struggle. So, you know, I guess, yeah, it would be nice if people would learn about this in high school and they would learn how to be in a relationship together when they're fighting with their friends. And there's a lot of work that can be done. But I guess, yeah, I mean, the same way people invest, tens of thousands of dollars in their weddings. I feel like this should be a requirement to make sure the investment pays off.
It's so funny that you say that because literally a few days ago, I was having a conversation and we were saying this about kala classes, right? But I remember saying this to this friend that I was talking to that I will never forget that during my engagement, my mother and my mother-in-law like got into an argument about the tongue that they wanted served at the wedding. Like my parents were marrying off their oldest, my in-laws were marrying off their youngest, and there, we also just come from very different like ideas of what social norms are, what cultural norms are. And my parents are very, can I say frugal? I think frugal. I don't, frugal's a good word. We don't spend money if we don't have to. I'm one of 9. We learned to live very much and my husband's from a more Hungarian kind of like everything is the word balbatish. Like I don't think I ever heard that word growing up. And it was just like, and to me, honestly, as the kala, I didn't care what was served at my wedding. I wasn't going to eat at my wedding. Like I had a gown to fit into. Like I was busy with other things. But I'll never forget, like my mother and mother-in-law, they weren't fighting. They're not those kinds of people. But it was like this back and forth. It was contention over whether there was going to be tongue served at my wedding. And till today, we're 20 years later. Till today, I remember that. I remember this back and forth over where the money was going to be spent at my wedding. I promise you, nobody who was at my wedding, and we had lots of guests at my wedding, nobody remembers what was served at that wedding. Nobody. Nobody cares. Nobody remembers the music that was played. Nobody remembers the food that they ate. Nobody even remembers the dress that they wore. I mean, okay, some people remember the dress that they wore. I don't know.
Did they get along, your mother and mother-in-law?
They don't, they're not connected. I mean,
You don't
like,
consider now.
no, like it's two different worlds. It's two different worlds. But also my parents, like again, like I said, they're also two different age brackets. My in-laws have children my parents' age
Oh my goodness. Wow.
because I was the oldest marrying a youngest, and my husband and I are around 10 years apart. So we are literally coming from not just a cultural gap, a generation gap, you know. Now, when you say about we wish that people had these tools before marriage, I mean, I say the same thing about kala classes, right? These halachos, you're going to be practicing forever, for as long as you're a naturally cycling woman. And hopefully, between pregnancy, childbirth, but yes, in between, you're going to be naturally cycling and you're going to need to know the halachos. And these halachos are much more than just halacha. They're a framework for healthy marriages, for healthy relationships, and for healthy bodies. And it's like, also, who's thinking about that? The kala is busy with so many other things. Her dress and her fittings and the furniture and the apartment. Who's thinking about this? And then they're 10 or 15 years into a marriage and they barely know anything about halacha. They're completely disconnected from it, or they hate it, right? And a big part of Ignite is getting women to fall back in love, or at least to get curious again about these concepts. And I feel so much the same way about these tools, about imago, about communication. And I know we were talking about this last week about, again, the hard time we have getting people to set up, to create a minimum of the class here in the tri-state area. And then both of us just said it like kind of at the same time. Why are we even trying? Yeah. We should not bring the Slatkins to the tri-state area because people should actually go to them. You're not that far. You're in Baltimore, right?
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's like 4 hours away from Borough Park, maybe 4.5 from Muncie. I was, it's funny because I felt a little bit guilty because I feel like it's a little bit that I'm a little bit of the holdup of why these classes haven't come to fruition because I have to leave my kids. I have to find somebody to stay at. And
oh, no apologies. I don't leave my house for under a certain amount of money. So I get you, girl, and you should be charging more. You should be charging a lot more.
It's a big slap. And I want to help people. But then I said the other day to you, I was like, Fally, I really like doing them in Baltimore. We do them once a quarter. People can come here. They can have
once a quarter, which means 4 times a year.
Yeah. They can come for a 3-hour car ride. We have plenty of kosher restaurants. We have shoals. We have everything you need, mikvahs, everything you need to come.
It's a private getaway away from the kids. They sleep over for a night or two. It's a mini vacation.
Yeah. So I think I'm not going to push myself. If it works out and we come to New York, great. But otherwise, people can join us in Baltimore.
But I'm stopping there. I don't think you should push yourself. I think the consensus we came to after we spoke was actually maybe you shouldn't come here because there is something to be said for, like you said, it's not that far. Couples figure out how to go on vacation all the time. They
Right.
figure out how to get on a plane and go to Florida or go to the Bahamas or whatever it is, but it's like it's so crazy that when it comes to can you get away for 2 days, 2 days with your spouse just to bond? And it's like, oh no, that's where the block is. If I asked you, can you get away for 2 days to go to Florida? Everybody can figure this out. But
Right.
for 2 days to go away, and it's not that far. It's a 4 hour drive. You're sleeping over, like you said, there's kosher, there's mikvahs, there's stuff. To do what? To
I get it.
bond.
I totally get it. Because look, I'm the one that didn't want to go. So I
Right,
understand.
right.
I get it because it's not
What are you trying to hide?
it, it's not as exciting as going to the Bahamas, and it's not as exciting to go, but I will tell you, your trip to Florida and the Bahamas will be a lot more pleasant next time you do go on vacation with your spouse and you have come to our workshop and done this work. You'll have a much better vacation in the future. So get it out of the way and then go to the Bahamas. It's fine. We actually have had couples where they're going to be going to Cancun or Bahamas, but they make a quick stop in Baltimore, do the workshop, and then fly out. So you could do that.
Wow.
Yeah. So we've had some couples do that, which, it's great. So yeah, it's really nice. At the end of the day, people usually walk out with a beautiful result and they're really more connected than they've probably been since they were first married.
Hey, going back to this, a few weeks ago on one of the Ignite Q&As, I had mentioned that I had heard this. It was a conversation between Jordan Peterson and Ben Shapiro, and they were talking about. It was a little snippet, that I got off my YouTube feed or whatever it was, and they were talking about what makes a healthy and successful marriage. And Jordan had said that, and I may be misquoting him, okay, so forgive me if I misquote him, but he said something along the lines of every healthy couple has found a way to spend a minimum of 90 minutes a week, twice a week, okay, together in like real focused present conversation. And that means that just it equals to 3 hours a week, right? And when I mentioned this on the Ignite Q&A call, like the Zoom chat exploded. Like, what? That's impossible. Are you crazy? Here we are. We're raising our children. We're doing a million things, like 3 hours. And I said, you know what? No, one second, one second. What if it wasn't 3 hours? What if I misquoted him? What if it was just 90 minutes? No, you're asking for too much. And then I said, wait, stop. Just stop. Anything that you value, and you know the things that you value, there are things in your world that you are spending 3 hours on per week. Whether it's you're spending 3 hours at the gym, or you're spending 3 hours on Netflix, or you're spending 3 hours talking to a friend on the phone, or going out for coffee dates with another friend. There are places in your life, or maybe you're even scrolling online, whether it's Instagram or you're shopping for shoes. But you have wasted, I know that when my phone started giving me my weekly insights to how much I've actually been using my
Right.
phone.
Those are so awful.
Yeah, I spend about, according to my phone, I don't believe everything my phone says, but according to my phone, I spend 32 hours a week on WhatsApp, which is insane, but also it makes a lot of sense. And then for me to have the chutzpah to say that I don't actually have 3 of those hours to spend present with the love of my life or whatever, who should be the love of my life.
Right.
The guy that I have chosen to spend my life with, that I share assets with and children with, right? But I can spend 32 hours on WhatsApp. And then you have people who are doing the same thing around your workshops. There is this fear of getting present.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what I could say that would help people. I always
How
tell
scary is it really?
people the first day, I always tell people, I always make a joke. I could only say this to your crowd probably. The first day,
My crowd, but it is going to go on YouTube and it's going to be public for everybody. Say it to everybody. Let everybody become my crowd.
Yeah, fine. So maybe, well, the first day, what I love is, so we have a combination of couples. We mostly have non-Jewish couples.
I was going to ask, do you only serve the frum community? And you're saying actually it's the opposite.
No, we have couples flying from California, from Texas, from Arizona, coming to our little dinky Baltimore 2-day workshop. And I'm like, whoa.
Dinky Baltimore.
Baltimore that's like this, not very exotic. But we have these couples, non-Jewish couples, they're coming, they're invested. And then you have from couples. And I love it when there's like a family from the inner city, like African-American couple sitting there. And then a guy with like longer payas, like sitting right next to him. Like, I love it because I know the first day they're feeling like so awkward and like scooching their chairs a little bit away from each other. And the next day they're like, hey man, how you doing? Like this. So I always tell people the first day, I know everyone's nervous. We could cut, it's really awkward. We could cut the air with a knife. And the second day, I'm like, everyone's going to be great friends. And they are. And it's like they're bonded. Two workshops ago, all these couples after the workshop ended up going to dinner together. Like it's definitely
Yeah,
all.
we did that. We did it on our workshop. A
Oh
bunch of
yeah,
us. Yeah, we did. We did dinner. Yeah, I
yeah, we
remember.
did. Yeah, that was a cozy one. So yeah, and these are complete strangers from all walks of life. And what's funny is on the street, like they would never talk to each other, or maybe they even have very diverse political views. But after doing this kind of work, there's no problem because people really got to like what's real. And we always say the end of the second day, like people are wondering, how can we go home after experiencing such real work? You know, how can we go back to the real world? And we always say, what you experience here is real. What's out there, that's just the noise. That's social norms. That's fake. Like this is
Social norms. Social norms are fake. Thank
yeah,
you. Say it
right.
again. I think I'm going to turn that into a bumper sticker or like a hoodie. Social norms are fake.
Yeah, it's just social, it's that's all noise and like pollution, but what they experience in that room is so real. So I remind them they'll always have that to go back to. But yeah, I mean, the first day, everyone's feeling nervous, and you walk in and you're like, oh my gosh, who are these people? But the second day, people are really cool with it, and you get over it, and it's you can really feel good about yourself and pat yourself on the back that like, wow, I just went up the food chain of personal growth and development. Like I'm a rung
In a
higher. You
very
know?
real, measurable way. I mean, I think also a lot today, the word the work is being thrown around. Like everybody's in the work and everybody does the work. And nobody has a consensus on what the work actually is. People think that as long as I'm reading really good books or taking a lot of courses, that's the work. But actually, as a former attendee, and I hope one day again to be an attendee, which also, hello, public service announcement, you can attend these workshops more than once. I think you need a refresher every couple of years. Um, I really did feel that your workshop was very measurable work and it didn't have to feel hard. It was like you knew when you participated in the exercises, you can feel something shifting inside of yourself. You can feel it shifting in the relationship, right? It was very measurable and you never look, you slip. No one's perfect, and I'm sure years pass, and that's why I say like I'm ready to do your workshop again. And the question if the husband is ready to do your workshop again. Yeah, it's hard getting two people in a marriage on the same page at the same
Yeah.
time. But I feel like when we came home, there was something different between us. I can't say that we have always adhered to the principles of imago theory and all of those dialogues. We haven't because they're awkward if you don't make the time. But one of the things that actually stayed with me very clearly, and now I'm afraid that maybe I'm making this up, but I think it stayed very clearly from you, but I could be making it up, was that you had spoken about dialogues needing to be an invitation and that
Mm.
there was a safety in inviting someone into the container. And instead of just starting a conversation and vomiting over the other person, where they're not sure where you're going, they're not sure if they're ready for that level of vulnerability or intensity, or also for the time, right? That was one of the biggest lessons I took out of the 2 days. You ask somebody if they're willing to meet you in conversation, and you give like a decent framework of like a time, like it's a short conversation. We can spend 5 minutes together or 10 minutes together. I know it sounds so simple, but it saved my life. Like to
Mm.
me, that is the baseline of safety in a conversation, right? And I think that this is what I keep trying to tell people when I send them to you. This is not crisis counseling. These are tools for life.
Yeah, it's the theme of the workshop is safety. So nobody's going to ask anybody to do anything they're uncomfortable. I tell people the first day, like, you're not taking off your clothes, you're not doing anything weird, you
And you
know.
don't have to share anything, right? No one's really sharing their
No.
stories. A lot of privacy.
Yeah, you don't have to share anything. Like I said, the only time people share something is when we say, what is one thing you'd like to learn more about? Or what's
Which
one,
is just a check-in.
yeah, just the check in, but no one has to say anything the whole time. So sometimes we have no idea why a couple is there. We have no idea. And nobody else does either. So that's I saw somebody in the chat wrote, how can you have such real work happen in a public setting? And it's because Shlomo and I do group instruction So we teach, let's say, something, and then we have the couples pair up with their partner and do private work together. And we walk around and we check on them and just make sure they're following the assignment. But the conversation that the couple's having is private. Nobody's listening. Um, so yeah, there's a lot
I
of,
think also people think that when something is public, that it's watered down, that you don't get the intensity of the experience because there are so many people in the room. And my experience wasn't like that at all. I think the work itself worked. It was like you said, you taught it, and then the implementation was actually relatively simple. And it was the tool itself that worked, like the tool I shared before, right? Inviting someone, asking someone, are you open to having a conversation with me for the next 5 or 10 minutes? That's a measure of safety. Where sometimes your spouse comes in and you can tell he's upset about something, and he starts talking, and you're like, not again. I'm tired. I just put all of the kids to bed. But you don't want to rock the boat because he needs to unburden himself, right? And if you tell him, I really can't right now, right? And then he's like, you never listen to me, you're never there. And just that small tool of like, I need 5 minutes of your time, right? And for me to be able to say, awesome, thank you for asking. I can't do it now. I just got off with the kids. Can we set up a time maybe later tonight or tomorrow morning? And like, it sounds so dumb on the surface, but it will save a marriage. I mean, I'm asking everybody on the call also, like, think about how many times you've gotten roped into one of those conversations. The conversation, yeah.
Or I'm like the one that will dump, like some of us will be the dumpers, right? So it's like the minute he comes home, we're like, can you fix this? Because da, 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 da. And it's like, okay, am I being a safe person right now? Am I going to bring out the best in him by me dumping on him? Or would it be better to say, like, there's something I want to talk to you about. When is a good time?
Right.
Yeah.
So we have some questions in the chat that I want to get to, but I do want to ask you one last question.
Sure.
What is it like doing this work with your husband? So like, is your marriage perfect? I mean, like, I need to know.
I think some people like don't invite us over for Shabbos lunch because they're like intimidated that we have this perfect marriage. And I'm like, come on, invite us. Like, don't be intimidated. No, we're totally not perfect. And sometimes my kids will be even like, what would happen if your clients knew that you guys weren't perfect and you're fighting and not using the
Let
tools?
me guess, your kids are teenagers. Yeah.
For sure. Yes. We have some advanced teenagers. But yes, no, we are totally not perfect. And that's actually part of the fun of the workshop is a lot of it is not sacrificing the attendees' privacies, but Shlomo and I are very open about our private work and our lives and our marriage. Sometimes we'll get annoyed at each other in the workshop, and then that's something we have to navigate.
Yeah, you actually started our workshop with one of your personal stories, right? The Kugel story.
Yeah, so that is a real, yeah, totally unplanned story. There's a video on our website people can go and watch of Shlomo giving this like TED type talk about potato kugel. And we actually show it every workshop, even when there are non-Jews there, and we just translate it for them. But yeah, we're very real. No, we are not perfect. We are a work in progress.
By the way, everyone needs to watch the Kugel video on the website, and we'll link the website below.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, for years, every Thursday or Friday when I was making my Kugel, I was thinking square Kugel or round Kugel. And then especially when the Betty Crocker like graced my kitchen.
Oh my gosh.
And the Betty Crocker is cut out for round Kugels. And I'm like, do I do it? Do I do it?
The backstory is I grew up just regular like yeshivish, and then I didn't even know that my husband was Hasidish when we got married until like I was having a mitzvah tams with our Rebbe, and I'm like, oh, okay, so I think we're changing here. But anyway, so Friday, like he would ask me to please make a kugel in a round pan, and I'm just like, why do you have to like dictate the shape of the pan? Like I'm already working hard to make kugel, like I just felt a lot of pressure. And that was like the video talks more about my mother who was feminist and didn't like men telling her what to do. Anyways, so that's part of that story. But yeah, so we have wonderful fights like that are just ridiculous. And they've grown, I guess, over the years in maturity, but no, we're not perfect.
All right. It's good to know. It really is good to know. I did mention this on one of the Ignite calls that when I was engaged, I was actually reading Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus by John Gray. And in his preface, he thanks his wife, who is his second wife. And he talks about the divorce that he went through. And I was so young when I was engaged. I was 17. I turned to my mother and I was like, why would anyone like trust this guy? I mean, he's writing like the best-selling book on marriage and relationships, and the guy was divorced. And my mother just like looked up at me and she said, how did you think he learned all of this? By making
Mm,
a lot of mistakes.
yeah.
And I do have to say, just sitting in the audience, as one of the attendees, you and your husband do not have one of those like sickly sweet, sticky relationships. I mean, you can tell that you guys are very real. Like you have your ups and downs. And I think that's also another thing about marriage counseling or imago. This is not about perfection. This is not about never fighting or never having arguments. It's just having better arguments, doing it better, doing it cleaner, doing it kinder, resolving them sooner and really resolving them, not just, going to that same cycle where it gets quiet and then it flares up a month later and it's the same argument, right? It's not about never fighting. It's just about how to communicate and fight nicely.
Yes, yes, that's a good way to put it for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's just jump over to some questions. I see that they've been popping in. So someone sends me a direct message, and I get a lot of these. Okay. And yet there are marriages that are never going to work. So abuse aside, right? Let's talk about those. Do you believe that there are marriages that are never going to work?
You know, it's not our job to tell people to stay together or not. We believe in Imago that the couple is ultimately the expert on their own relationship. So after trying everything and learning the
Wait,
foundation,
hold up, hold on. The couple is the expert on their own relationship. Like, way to empower the couple. Because I know a lot of couples feel very disempowered when they start counseling.
yeah, a lot of counseling is what's the word? Where you come up with the compromise. Oh, you take out the trash on Wednesdays and she'll do this on Thursdays. And like that is a band-aid. That's not getting to the root of what's going on. If you really get to the root of what's going on, a lot of that stuff will kind of just fall like dominoes. So our very first imago therapy session, when we went to someone, I was annoyed because I felt like my husband had this expectation I had to take the clothes to the dry cleaners. I don't know why I felt so pressured about it.
About the dry cleaners.
The dry cleaners.
That's what you spent a session on, talking about the
Yeah.
dry cleaners.
Yeah. And he hadn't even asked me to go. And I was just stressed out about it and crying about it. I don't know what it was. But at the end, the therapist, so I said my piece and Shlomo mirrored me and listened. And then the therapist goes, and Rivka, is this a familiar feeling from childhood? This feeling of being burdened and having everything on your shoulders and having to do everything yourself. And I'm like, yeah, like it was like, whoa. And when I connected the frustration to what was going on for me in the past and that same old feeling of having, to do everything myself, my parents were fighting so many hours, they didn't give us dinner. It all went back to that. And then everything else just fell like dominoes because I understood what was going on at the root. So ultimately, we're not going to tell people if they should stay together or not. Once the couple does the work, they'll figure that out themselves if ultimately they feel they can.
Okay, so then we have to talk about like the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the narcissists. Because today, I mean, one of the first conversations that I ever had with your husband, like I said, I walked in and he was sitting in my, on the couch in my hallway, and we had that conversation right then. And I remember him saying like so calmly, I'm not in the business of pathologizing people, and this was in 2018 before, like, I mean, the explosion was happening then, but it's still snowballing right now.
Yeah.
Everyone's a narcissist. Everyone's BPD. Everyone has the word toxic is just thrown around. Everyone has issues,
Yeah.
right? And we're so busy labeling everybody all of the time. So what do you do? I mean, have you actually met a real narcissist? I'm asking you, the couples counselor, have you met a real narcissist? Have you worked with a real narcissist? What do you say to the phenomena that everyone thinks that their husband is a narcissist or, borderline personality or something of, something?
Okay. So
Everyone has the verbiage today.
right. So again, I'm not a licensed clinical therapist. I will say that I did for many years. I think I still do, but I believe that one of my parents was like a certifiable narcissist. And for so many years, I kept saying like, I can't work with this parent. I can't talk to them. I can't do anything with them. And then one time after we were married, I had an argument with this parent. And Shlomo was in school and he was kind of like, do you guys mind if I try out my new skill? So he actually sat me down with this parent who I'm telling you, I could never talk to. Like it was so unhealthy. And he had us do an imago dialogue, very simple, very
I'm
structured.
surprised that your parent agreed to that.
Me too, because the other parent who I've asked to have him before goes, no, I will not have that with you because then I will have to agree with you. And I'm like, that's so not what it is, but
So
whatever.
wait a second. The other parent, the
The
parent who
other
is
parent
not the narcissist,
would,
did
who
not
actually,
want
I'm realizing now that they probably both technically would get that diagnosis, but the one who was maybe I thought was even more okay,
the one
like
that
the other
troubled
one
you
won't,
more.
yeah, the other one won't dialogue with me because they think they'd have to agree with me. So if that one wasn't the diagnosed narcissist,
I can't get over this. They won't dialogue with you because they're afraid that they might have to agree with you. And this
correct.
is something also. People are so afraid. They're so invested in being right that
Yeah,
they won't even do what they don't want to be happy. They just want to be right.
right, exactly. So for years, like I really haven't been able to really connect so much. Anyway, so this was years ago, but something happened. I was very uncomfortable on Shabbos. We were visiting, whatever. And Shlomo facilitated a very short dialogue. It was clear. And this parent was able to do it. And we'll just say, let's say it was dad. He was able to hear me in a way I had never thought he was capable because I always said he's such a narcissist. There's no way he could hear me. And it was in bite-sized pieces. I shared what I was able to share. Shlomo had him repeat it back, mirroring, validation, empathy, and he did it. And I was like blown away because for years I would bash this parent. I'd be like, narcissist, bipolar, everything bad. And I couldn't believe he got it. Does it mean I always want to talk to him or spend time with him or whatever? Not necessarily, but people surprise you when you don't push their buttons and assume things or diagnose them or maybe make their environment really unsafe. Like they will surprise you. So I was shocked, but I do think we are this makes me sad about our firm world. I do feel that we are lost when it comes to this diagnosing and maybe we've steered off the path a little bit of the Torah path and we've kind of followed the therapy path, which in many ways is misguided. So, like, we have to ask ourselves, who are we getting our information from? Like, is
Instagram, Instagram, Instagram.
oh my God, we have to like remember that we're Torah Judaism. And like, okay, this is a whole nother topic and we don't have time for it, but yeah, I think we've lost our way when it comes to overdiagnosing. And in the firm world, I feel like we should know better, and give people more of an opportunity to prove themselves. But then again, there's no tools. So like most people don't really know about the tools. So
So,
and
which brings me into the next question that someone asked. Why does she feel that this modality is what can save a marriage? Everyone feels that their way is the best way. And I hear you're talking about tools.
yeah, well, one of the reasons I say that is because we get so many calls from couples, not just
And hold on, I'm going to read the next question because I think it ties in as well. Okay. This is from someone who is training. She's in school for her MFT. And so far, it sounds like marriage counseling has a lot of fighting, and the therapist has to break up the tension in the room. So she's curious, what is the atmosphere like in Imago sessions? Is this modality different from other forms of couples therapy? What makes it so successful in your opinion? So two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
yeah. So like we were talking about the definition of insanity. So the setting is when a couple comes in, there's no shaming and blaming. There's no yelling and screaming because that would just be repeating the same dynamic at home. So how would that change anything? So Shlomo instructs the couple, there is a script, there will be one person sending and one person receiving, and only one person can share at a time. And we are going to visit the other person's world like we're a guest in a foreign country. And maybe in that country, they do really wacky customs. And you know what? You're just a guest. So when you're traveling over the bridge into another person's world to hear their story, you're not judging them, you're not criticizing them, you're not trying to change their custom, you're just a guest. So couples learn very quickly that dumping and screaming and shaming and blaming is not a safe way to communicate. And it's going to get you the opposite of what you want. So,
Right. It's like visiting Paris and expecting it to be New York. You're losing out on all the beauty of Paris.
yeah, or something really even bad that they do maybe in another country. And it's like, okay, I can't change these people. This is their custom. This is what they, they walk around, like, I don't know. So it's the same with visiting our partner's world. Our partner is an other person, even though we're married to them. We started out as one, but really they are their own person, and we don't need to be threatened by them as a person. So we can visit their world and hear their story and like give them space. So Imago is the only modality that I know of that has that model of the structured dialogue where one person speaks and the other person mirrors back, and all the steps leading up to it. Gottman is like, the thing about Imago is Harville was really popular in the 80s when he came out with Getting the Love You Want.
You mean before I was born?
Yes. So he was on Oprah, 17 times. And that was kind of the social media then. But then marketing changed. And so there's no more Oprah show. So Imago, all the clinicians are kind of on the older side. They don't have sophisticated marketing backgrounds. Gottman, I would say, is like a newer therapy, and he's research based. But we get so many calls. Yeah, we did Gottman and it didn't work for us. So that's the only way. I don't know these other modalities that well. I just know that there are couples that have come to us that have been to like 9 different marriage counselors and say, I finally found something that can work. So take it or leave it. But
Yeah, no, that's a big one. Like you say, the social media aspect, right, of people promoting different modalities. And this one has been around for a while, but people are not talking about it as much.
as much,
And
yeah.
and what I am finding is that the people who are using Imago actually have no idea what Imago is. There's like, again, it became a buzzword. So the people who speak about Imago, no, many of them have never even read the book. And there was someone who was a couples counselor who's training to be a couples counselor actually had reached out to me. We were in a conversation and I mentioned, I think you should really look into Imago work. And she came back like a week later saying, no, it's just BS. Like, it's very stupid. It's not like I read it. And I said, excuse me, I'm sorry. Did you what? Like, did you read the book or did you read about it online? And did you actually try this dialogue? She's like, no, I read, like I flipped to the end and I read the dialogue and it just sounds very elementary. I said, well, before you come back to me, go find a partner and go try the dialogue. And a week later she came back to me and she was like, oh, wow, yeah, I was not expecting that. And I think that's also what's happening. It's like, it's not just that people don't know about Imago. The things that they think they do know about Imago aren't Imago.
Yeah, part of that is unfortunately someone will take a class in Imago or read a little bit about it and say, I do Imago. And then they promote themselves as an Imago therapist, which is not ethical. Um, so just because someone attended a CEU training for Imago therapy does not mean they're a certified Imago relationship therapist.
CEU is continuing hours of education, right? So
Yeah.
it's just like, a 6-hour day. It's not a training. To
Yeah.
become an Imago certified therapist is months, if not years, right?
Yeah, years. And there's a big difference. It's not just about the dialogue. There's so much foundation that needs to go into it, understanding couplehood, understanding why we picked the person that we did, and all that goes into it. It's very deep. But you're right, a lot of like the slick marketing nowadays, Imago, they're very, everyone's kind of older and not really sophisticated. They're trying now
Yeah.
to improve their marketing for sure.
Yeah, I hear that. So someone's asking, there are a couple more questions. I know we're like short on time, but I want to get to a few because they're really good. Someone says, like, couples who have a hard time talking, can they do this work? We don't fight because one spouse like shuts down and doesn't continue, so open conversations don't happen much either.
Hmm.
And then, hold on, there's somebody else who, again, similar question, right? My question is, if I am so estranged from my husband at this point, years of pain and so burnt out, is Imago able to help us? I don't even have strength or hope to work on the marriage anymore.
Hmm.
So you have two different couples coming from, one extreme pain, one extreme shutdown. Are they the right fit for you guys?
Yeah, that's really hard. I mean, I'm sorry that it's so hard. So the first dynamic, we talk a lot about the maximizer minimizer dynamic, which I don't know that we have so much time to go into. There's more on our website about it, but it sounds to me that sometimes two people are minimizers where they don't talk a lot and they're not so expressive. And still, we've seen it that two minimizers can definitely arrange to have structured dialogue, let's say on a date night. Let's say if they're making a time to go out anyways, they could just have an appreciation that they want to share with each other. It doesn't always have to be about something negative or something that's wrong, but to learn how to share an appreciation in a way that's structured, where one person is sending an appreciation and the other person, instead of saying like, oh, no problem, my pleasure, like they actually learn how to hear it. So what I hear you say is you really appreciate that I made your favorite dinner. Did I get you? Is there more? And then that kind of goes deep, and it's a really nice positive way to have connection. So no, you don't have to bring up like all these topics you don't want to talk about. So that was the first question that you asked about two people that don't really talk that much.
Right. One of them who's just like very quiet, does not do any open dialogue, doesn't get vulnerable. But you're saying that these are tools to teach them how to respond in such a way. And like it sounds a little formulaic.
It
And-
is. It's a structured way of talking, so it's different than just off the cuff conversation. But think about now, like we always say to people who are resistant to using it, well, how's the communication going for you now? Like,
Right.
do you feel like it's going well? Okay, well, if not, why don't you just take a risk and try something new? So, and you don't always have to be so deep and so vulnerable. It's just learning how to also speak in a way that's not critical or shaming or blaming.
Which is something that you can use outside of the marriage as well, right?
Yeah,
You use it in your parenting, you use it in business.
for sure.
And
Absolutely.
moving on to the couple that's like we're
Yeah,
estranged, we're there's nothing left.
we love those couples because
Wow.
yeah, no, I mean Shlomo loves the challenge because it's almost more gratifying than a couple that comes in with barely anything going on, because you can see such a beautiful, amazing transformation with the more extreme cases sometimes. I mean, we love helping everyone, but the more extreme cases sometimes you see a difference quite loudly.
Yeah, I mean, I really hear that, and I think also when I hear of someone like this who's like they're estranged and it's going on for so long, my question is always, okay, so why haven't you divorced yet?
Right.
Right? So it's not even my when I hear a couple like this, what I'm really hearing is the pain is not even the estrangement. The pain is the stuckness.
Hmm.
The pain is being stuck in this particular frozen moment in time without movement, like movement towards dissolving the relationship or movement towards healing the relationship, but don't be stuck here. So my guess is that that's what your workshop offers, a point for movement.
Yeah, I mean, there's still hope. We even have couples that already got divorced and then they want to get back together. So they
Wow.
have, yeah. So this couple hasn't called it quits yet. So there's hope, and we always say like, even when you don't have hope, like we hold the hope for you because we're confident in the process and we trust the process enough to know that usually at the end of the day, like there's something beautiful. There's an opportunity to almost mine for the gold that's hidden under, and we want to find it. So we hold the hope for the couple even when they don't have hope themselves.
That's incredible. And I think that's the hallmark of a great therapist, right? Someone who's seeing beyond just the argument that's happening right in front of them. They're seeing the vision of the potential, right? They're holding the hope.
Yeah,
I love that. All right.
yeah.
So
It's like the tip
last,
of an
yeah,
iceberg. Yeah,
tip, the tip of the iceberg,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
So
there's always
last
something.
question, because I know we wanted to keep the time, but people are asking, so wait, so what is it that you do? It's just the 2-day workshops? Because, especially this person who is training to become a counselor herself, she's like, wait, isn't counseling like weekly sessions? So you're mentioning that you offer the 2-day couples workshop, which is the Getting the Love You Want. You do that either as a private intensive or as a group, right, which you offer quarterly. And then you're also creating the Keeping the Love You Find workshop, either for people who are not in a relationship yet, or for people who are in a relationship, but their spouse is not willing to come with them, right? Just for individual work. What else do you offer? Do you offer weekly sessions?
Sure.
What happens there?
Yeah. So weekly sessions come with the private 2-day. So the 2-day private comes with 8 90-minute follow-up sessions. So
Okay,
like
so
I said in the beginning,
if someone books, if they want weekly sessions with you, it starts off by taking 2 days of the private workshop, right? What if they take 2 days of the couples workshop? Can they then continue to
so
the, okay.
yeah, they can add on a package of 4 or 8 follow-up sessions after the 2-day group workshop.
So prerequisite qualifier is you have to have taken the 2-day workshop, whether you're taking it in a group or you're taking it private.
Correct.
And then there's
Yeah.
the either 4 or 8 follow-up sessions.
Yeah, and those don't expire. They're kind of built into the private, but even when people's 8 sessions are over, they might be like, "Hey, we really enjoyed working with you. We want to do another 8," and they can just add that on. We never let a couple go when, like, we don't want to keep people in therapy for a while, so we're happy to have them finish. But if people don't feel like they want to finish, then we support them.
I'm confused. Sorry.
Sorry.
No. What I'm trying to say is I have couples who have been in marriage therapy for years. And you're like confidently and casually being like, nope, we do a 4-session package or an 8-session package. And if you'd like to extend that, you can. But I'm not hearing you say that when a couple comes to you, even a couple in crisis, that they're going to be with you for years.
No, I mean, I would say rarely, like, I can't even think of the longest client Shlomo's had, but at some point, people usually graduate. Like, they are good. Maybe they'll want to do a refresher here and there, but and also it's like once they have the tool, a friend of mine who did our Getting the Love You Want workshop, she told me, she's like, Rivka, I never did any of the things you told me to do. I never did any of the homework. She goes, but you permanently changed my marriage because now I see my husband in such a different way. I see him with all of his pain from childhood. I understand where he's coming from when he gets upset. She's like, I didn't need to do anything else. So no, we don't want people in therapy forever. If they want to, like, have a date with Shlomo, they can have that. Like,
Yeah,
sometimes people make
you
their
can pay a
dates
premium to have a date with him, you know.
right, but no, like, usually people graduate. I mean, yeah,
I
I
think
can't
this
say
is
100.
this is
Go ahead.
important for me, and to bring out here because I hear it from couples so often. Like, we've tried everything. We've been in couples counseling for years. When I talk to couples, or when couples talk to me, what I hear is that they are tired. They are burnt out. They don't want to start again. They don't want to start, especially starting with a new therapist. It just feels like it's a whole new relationship. It takes months to warm up, to even decide if you like the therapist. And you can be with a therapist for 3-4 months before you realize you're not going anywhere. And you're like, what? No, you're going to be with us for like 2 months max.
Yeah, it's funny, we don't even take a history with couples. Like, first session, 2 days, like, people say to Shlomo or any of our therapists, do you need to know our history? Like, do you need to know what we've been fighting about? No, like, because when you come in, you start your chair, you're sitting across face to face with your partner, and you're talking to your partner. You're not talking to us as a therapist. You are talking to your partner and learning how to talk like you've never talked before. And you're coming up with your own solutions to your problems. So you don't even we're only there to make sure it's safe, but you don't need us to tell you what to do. You come with that, like, couples are able to do that themselves. I think that's the difference.
That is amazing. So basically, what you're saying is you're putting the power back into the relationship. They're
Yeah,
finding their own
absolutely.
solutions, and that's why they graduate, because you're not creating couples that are addicted to their counselor. Their counselor is not an intermediary. You're not solving their problems. It's not he said, she said. It's not compromising, right? It's not solution oriented. It's communication oriented.
Yeah. And people should really be aware that, like, the therapy world is dangerous. Like, there are therapists that really need a therapist. Like, it's dangerous if your therapist wants, I don't know, I shouldn't say what's dangerous, but just use discernment. Like, if something doesn't feel right and you can't tell your therapist when you want to leave, like, I don't know, there's just a lot that could go
Yeah, I
wrong in
love
couples.
that there's a real plan for when a client begins with you, they already know when they're going to end, when and how they're going to end with you. There's an exit strategy built in when we start.
Mm.
I think that again, like you said, Imago is all about safety. And what I'm seeing right now is that a lot of therapists are like, the therapy world is exploding, but there's very little being said or being practiced in terms of safety. And they're all like, oh, we're providing a safe space, we're providing a safe space. But beyond that safe space, do you feel comfortable, like you say, telling your therapist you would like to quit therapy, or telling your therapist you're uncomfortable with a therapist? What does safe space actually mean? And it really starts with, like I said before, the invitation. I'm inviting you into a conversation with me that's going to last 5 minutes. I'm inviting you to work with me and it's going to last 8 weeks, right? There's a safety
Yeah,
just
I
in
haven't
just
thought of it
how we
that
said
way.
that.
That's cool. I haven't actually thought of it that way, that we have like an ending built in and that's safe for people. That's
So now you
cool.
have like that and the champagne piece.
Yes. Thank you, Fally. And really, Fally, like from the bottom of my heart, thank you for believing in our work. And like really, I don't think I've ever like properly thanked you for sending all these couples, because you just send so many and it's like an open door,
Everybody just
revolving
go.
door. But like, yeah, just thank you so much for believing in our work. Like it's so wonderful to have your trust. And I know it takes a lot to earn your trust. So it means a lot.
And you have my trust. Well, thank you for that acknowledgement, but you have my trust because I really experienced firsthand what your work is like. And there are, people today on the market, a dime a dozen, but when I recommend someone, I recommend it with my full heart because I've been there. I've done that and I've experienced it. And like I said, I went to school for this. And it was so clear to me that this was not going to be my mission. It was not going to be my passion. As good as I am in the work that I do, it's just not where my heart, you know what you say, we hold the hope for the couples. I'm not that person. I
Yeah.
hold hope in other ways. And when I met someone like your husband and yourself that can do that, and you put it so eloquently, we hold the hope. I'm like, then everyone should know. Go to the people who can hold the hope for you. Go to the people who can teach us how you do this for yourself. So I will just keep sending people your way.
Thank you, Fally.
All right. Thank you so much. And we're going to send out the recording. If you're on the Ignite cohort, you'll get the recording a little later tomorrow on your course platform. But wherever you're watching this, whether you're watching this on the Ignite platform or you're watching this on YouTube, if you just go down below, you'll get all the information you need to find the Slatkins at themarriagerestorationproject.com, where you can check them out. You can check out the video of their Kugel story and their offerings. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you, Rivka. Have an amazing night.